Thank you, Marilyn.
You're welcome.
All right. Susan, good to see you, my dear. I can't hear. Oh, you're still on mute.
Start with the Old
That's all
Testament,
right.
you're saying, Father?
Hmm?
We're going to start with the Old Testament, you're saying?
No, we are going to look at the Jamesons in the Bible, and it's more or less of taking notes because I'm hoping that you will have read the stuff that I sent to you, because there's little bits and pieces of passages from different parts of the Gospels and so forth. But we are going to look at 4 of the Jameses today, the 4 major ones in the Bible. They're all in the New Testament. There are probably about 6 of them, I think, but the others, there's nothing really about them, except for a name may have been mentioned. But the first James I want us to look at is the one who is the disciple, the son of Zebedee, the brother of John. James is one of the original 12 apostles or 12 disciples that Jesus chose when he first came. And according to the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, they are among the first, he and his brother John are among the first to be summoned by Jesus. And
are they also in the book of Luke as well, too?
Not in terms of being the first to be summoned. They will be, but they're going. That's why I said there's various bits and pieces, so we can't. But in terms of being among the first to be summoned, is mostly recorded in Matthew and Mark's Gospel.
What chapter in Matthew?
Oh gosh, I don't have it to hand. But it will be probably near to maybe chapter 1 of Mark's Gospel, probably. But we are not going to read it. Let me see for you.
For Matthew, you said 10 chapter 10 verse 2 and chapter 17 verses 1 through 13.
Okay, and it's also in Mark's Gospel chapter 1 as well.
Mark chapter 1, Mark chapter 3, Mark chapter 10, Mark chapter 13, Mark chapter 14.
Okay.
So it's in Matthew chapter 10, you're saying?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think the second reading in Matthew is the Transfiguration. It's not really the choosing.
Yeah, but it talk. All right, hold on. Just listen. Because don't worry about the Bibles right now. Just write. The most thing you're supposed to do now is to write some notes about the characters, because as I said, James is in various aspects of each gospel, and therefore we are not going to be able to we will read a couple of texts, but we're not going to be able to read them in their entirety. Okay. So as I said, according to Matthew's Gospel and Mark's Gospel, James and John are among the first to be summoned up by Jesus. You will learn that Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee just after he had begun his public ministry, and he first called to Simon, who is also Peter, and he also called Andrew. And you know, Simon, Peter, and Andrew were brothers, and they were casting their nets in the sea, and then immediately they left their nets and followed him. And then Mark's Gospel, chapter 1, tells you they were going on a little farther, and he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, and they were in their boat mending their nets. And Jesus called out to them to follow him, and they left the father in the boat with the hired servants, and they followed Jesus as well. Now, according to Luke's Gospel, the sons of Zebedee, James and John, were partners of Peter. They were fishing buddies and had been fishing all night without luck in a separate boat when Jesus first came to them. And before calling them, Jesus had demonstrated his mastery of nature. We see that in Luke chapter 5, where he was able to fill their nets to such an extent that they started bursting with fish. And Jesus says to them, do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching men, catching people. And that's in Luke chapter 5, Luke's Gospel chapter 5. Now, these four disciples, Peter and Andrew, James and John, were not only the first call, but they're always named first in the list of the 12 apostles. And they tend to be the most prominent in the Gospels out of Jesus's disciples. So I wanted to share that with you. And you will realize that whenever James and John are mentioned together, James is usually mentioned first. His name is usually comes before John, which seems to gives us the message that he was elder to John, and that is why his name was always mentioned first. And about their parents, we know that they were the sons of Zebedee, and that the father was of good reputation, that he and so much so that he had hired servants. So which means he had there was some means. He was a man of some means. The mother was also prominent in the Gospels, being listed as one of the women who witnessed the crucifixion and who discovered the empty tomb on the third day. And Mark's Gospel refers to her as Salome. That was James and John's mother. Now, Peter, James, and John were the apostles closest to Jesus. I like to call them the inner circle. And you will find that on several occasions, they were taken aside from the other disciples to be special witnesses to miracles and to lessons that Jesus was teaching. And one of the things you may have heard me said before is the closer you draw in your relationship to God, the more God will reveal to you. That is how God reveals of himself to us when we draw closer to him in relationship. And it is to be presumed that Peter, James, and John were the three main disciples who drew closer in their relationship to Jesus. The other disciples, the other 9, were always seen like secondary disciples. There were, and I'll show you how Peter, James, and John were always set aside or called aside. And you hear, and I'll show you too why I say that the more we grow in our relationship with God, the more he reveals to us. So let's look, now you can turn to your Bibles in Mark chapter 5. If you turn to Mark chapter 5 in your Bibles,
Got it.
and in Mark chapter 5, so that we can get through quicker, I am going to do most of the reading, if not all, because there's not many verses to read anyhow. But in Mark chapter 5, you will see here, let's see. Let's go down to here as well. Just give me a second. Right, I'm going to start with Mark chapter 5, verse 21. And then I'll tell you the next part to go to. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. And then you will see in between there is the miracle of the woman who had an issue of blood suffering for 12 years. So I want you now to go to verse 35 of the same passage of Mark chapter 5. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus and the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bothered the teacher anymore?" And overhearing what they said, Jesus said, "Do not be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, when they came to the house of the synagogue leader. Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. And after he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha kum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. And immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. So here what I'm trying to say is, here you see he came with all the disciples, but he left the others, and he brought Peter and John, James and John to the house. And even when he got to the house, because of the disbelief of those in the house, he didn't want to have nothing to do with them, because it sends the message, and this is where it is important to us as well, that when we got family and friends who we claim that we want to heal, who are sick, we also have to have faith that they can be healed, that God will heal them. And so you see, Jesus is saying, is more or less saying here, you all don't believe, you all don't deserve to be inside when the healing is going on. And he only takes the parents, the mother and the father, who you will believe, since they had sent for him, they do believe that he can heal her. And then you have those in the disciples in the inner circle, Peter, James, and John, who would have been also, remember Jesus would have said later down that you all are going to do even greater works than I can. And so it was all part of a learning process for them as well, as they see Jesus perform and along with their faith. So here you see Peter, James, and John are the ones who are there. You know, if you remember the story on the Mount of Transfiguration, on the Mount of Transfiguration, where Jesus goes up on the mountain and he leaves the other disciples behind, and who does he take with him again? Peter, James, and John. And when they get up on the top of the mountain, the three of them were able to see Moses and Elijah and Jesus standing on the Mount of Transfiguration. Again, you realize again, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John, and it's recorded in Mark's Gospel, chapter 9, and you can also see it in a couple of another gospel. I don't remember which one it is.
Matthew 17, 1 to 13.
Right, Matthew 17. Thank you, Deacon. And then you see again a third time where Jesus takes Peter, James, and John, and when he had just ate the Last Supper with them, and he takes them into the Garden of Gethsemane with him. He lets the others, let's turn to that. Let me see if I can find Mark chapter 14. Let's look at Mark chapter 14. Mark chapter 14. Let me see. Where do I want to start? I'm going to start at verse 32. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." And going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, not what I will, but what you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Could you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." So here again, you see, he takes Peter and James and John with him when he goes to pray. And if you get the sense, you could sense that Peter is the main disciple. He's the number one disciple, because Peter's name is always mentioned first in the threesome. And you also realize that although all three of them were sleeping, he more or less pointed his finger at Simon. So even if the other two were sleeping, Simon, you should have stayed awake, kind of thing. You find there.
How come they never stayed awake? I mean, is there a reason why they didn't want to stay awake during Jesus' execution?
Well, that was not his execution. That was before his betrayal. But obviously, they were tired. They had just eaten. You know what happens when you eat after eating? And then
Yes.
so they had just had supper, and they just was tired. They fell asleep. So
Yeah, so they probably just fell asleep and they didn't want to know about his execution, I guess not.
Yeah. Well, they left.
They were afraid.
They ran away before he was executed. They were not around when he was executed.
Why would they run away? I mean,
Well,
their
they
friend
were
is about to be
they were
executed and
afraid.
be
Yeah,
killed.
yeah, but they were afraid, and you also have to
tough times.
realize, a whole lot of it. They were afraid, but also too, not only were they afraid for him, they were afraid of themselves.
Yeah, they were
That they
intimidated.
probably could have been executed as well.
Right.
Obviously, they were going around with him for a long time, so that was quite
Yeah,
possible.
but they got executed later in life, not.
That is true. Well, their time had not come yet. So, let's continue. Now, James and John were also, Jesus gave them a last name. He surnamed them Boanerges, which means sons of thunder. You'll see that in Mark's Gospel, chapter 3 and verse 17. And the name, he gave them that name because they had a fiery personality. And they had this impetuous, this impulsive personality. And so Jesus gave them like a surname, Boanerges. And so, which means sons of thunder. And even to show you some of their impulsiveness, if you go to Luke chapter, if you were to see Luke, and you can write the text down and look at it afterwards. You look at Luke chapter 9 and verse 54, when the Samaritans failed to show hospitality to Jesus, they inquired, Lord, do you want us to bid fire come down from heaven and consume them? They go for the jugular. They're ready to burn up all the people because they would not show hospitality to Jesus. And so Jesus rebuked them for saying what they had said. That was one of the occasions. The other occasion is that where you see their impulsiveness, and there's a difference. Matthew's Gospel say the mother asks for positions of authority, of place for them. Mark's Gospel says they ask. If you were to read Mark's Gospel, chapter 10, you will see that they're the ones who ask to have one place on Jesus's right and the other on Jesus's left. And you read Matthew chapter 20, in verses 20 and 21, the request is made by their mother. So, yes, Pam.
Blame the women.
I think, honestly, I'm not blaming the women. I think she behaved just like a typical Jewish woman for her sons. I think
the boys did it, and Mark had it right, and Matthew decided to blame the women.
Well, it's possible. I mean, you might be right, because Mark's Gospel was written first. So you never know, you see, so it could be.
Yep. Gosh forbid that a disciple might have to have that kind of an impure thought. That's what happened. They changed the story.
Oh my gosh. Now, James is the only disciple in that of the 12. As you know, 11 of the 12 disciples were martyred. The only one that was not martyred was John. And James is recorded in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 12, as being Acts chapter 12, verse 2. You can make note of it, that James is the only one who was put to death, and it is mentioned in the New Testament in the Acts of the Apostles. All the others, we know they were martyred, but their martyrdom is not mentioned. Only James is. Who can tell me which country is James the patron saint?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
Probably England.
No, George is the patron saint of England. We know Andrew is the patron saint of Scotland.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yes, Andrew is the patron saint of Scotland. Andrew feast day is November 30th, which is, and is actually, if there was to be a patron saint of Barbados, it would be also Andrew, because that's the day on which we were made independent as well as a republic. And before time in Barbados, when people were knighted, since it came under the British monarchy, when people were knighted in Barbados, they were granted a Knight of St. Andrew, because the Independence Day is St. Andrew's Day.
Spain.
Is November.
Yeah, but they still drive on
you
the wrong
have-
side of the road.
Huh?
They
Huh?
still drive on the wrong side of the road. They do
Well,
still drive on the left hand
That's
side.
all right. That's all right.
They aren't the only ones.
But George, and St. George, which is feast day, is April the 23rd, is the patron saint of the UK. I know somebody looked it up because I heard him calling the name, so I know they looked it up. Who was that?
Marilyn did.
Marilyn. Yes.
Patron saint of Spain and pilgrims.
Yeah, James is a patron saint of Spain. He's a patron saint of pilgrims, and he's presumed to be buried in the Santiago de Compostela, which is in Spain, which many pilgrims make every year, and go and walk miles. I think I can't remember, a couple of 100 miles long, where their thing. I would like to do that one of these days. There's a friend of mine who's a priest in Houston who wants me and him to do that together. So we'll see how that goes. But
Now, did he write the book of James also?
it is. We are unsure. We believe it was James of Jerusalem,
Oh,
and I will get to that later on. Yes.
So he's also the patron saint of Nicaragua and Guatemala.
Oh, he is.
Who
Did not
knew?
know
Yeah.
that. Did not know that. I know
he gets
he
around.
Oh, yes. I guess he's the patron saint of all the Spanish countries. Let's say that.
Does America have a patron saint?
Not to my knowledge, but
Not that I know of. The United States of America does not have a patron saint.
not to my knowledge. No.
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
We do not have a patron saint here in the United States.
All right. Okay. Any questions on James?
Not that I know of.
Okay, let's go to the next James, which is short. James, the son of Alphaeus. His name is one of the 12 disciples, and he's mentioned in all 4 Gospels, in Matthew chapter 10, Mark chapter 3, Luke chapter 6, and Acts. Well, not in John's Gospel, he's not mentioned, but also mentioned in Acts chapter 1 and verse 13. He is seen. He is possibly the brother of Matthew, who is also, if you've ever heard the name Levi in the New Testament, Matthew and Levi, we believe, is the same person. The same way we believe that Nathaniel and Bartholomew are the same people. And so
I have a question.
But wait, hold a minute, Bryce. Hold a minute. But Levi or Matthew is also a son of Alphaeus. And so we believe that James, this second James we are talking about, was the brother of Levi, who's also believed to be Matthew. There's no mention in the Bible of the 2 of them being brothers, like how Peter and Andrew are mentioned as brothers and James and John are mentioned as brothers. But based on what we see, it appears that they may be, that they were brothers. But in terms of this particular James, who's the son of Alphaeus, there's nothing really to report about him. He's not famous for anything that he has done. Yes, Bryce.
Poor guy.
One question. How come none of these people are not mentioned in the book of John? How come they're not mentioned in the Gospel according to John?
Well, you see, you have to remember that John's gospel is a different type of gospel to the other 3. The other 3 gospels are known to be like the synoptic gospels. They're more historical books. John's gospel is more of a theological book.
How come?
Well, think about it. When you start to read John's gospel, you will realize there's no historical story of the nativity. It talks about Jesus being, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It does not speak about Jesus and Mary and Joseph going to Bethlehem or anything like that.
Or even going to Egypt.
Going to Bethlehem for where Jesus was born.
Right. And also escaped from Bethlehem to Egypt.
Right. But what I'm saying is, it is a different type of gospel. And so you will find that in John's gospel has normally a lot of different things to the other three. The other three are more historical.
But they still talk about Jesus' crucifixion, although in the gospel.
Well, yes. The major things like the crucifixion and the resurrection, they do mention about. There's only one parable. There's only one parable that takes place in all four gospels. I don't know if anybody knows that. Anyone knows which parable that is? Don't look it
the
up.
Wine. Water into wine.
No. What about the stones on the side of the road?
Hold on. Let me hear Celeste and then let me hear the deacon. Celeste?
The stones on the side of the seeds on the side of the road.
No, not that, Celeste. Deacon?
I thought it was water into wine.
All right, no, not that, Bryce. Let me hear the deacon, please.
The feeding of the people.
The feeding of the 5,000, correct. The feeding of the 5,000.
Man, I got stumped.
The
I would never have known that.
The feeding of the 5,000 is the only story
I thought it was the water. I thought it was water changing to wine.
No. The feeding of the 5,000 is the only parable.
So the feeding of the 5,000 are the
only one that is the only one that is recorded in all four gospels.
Why is that?
Ask
That's
Jesus.
not considered a parable, though, is it?
Well, when I say parable, I said parable or story. Yes.
Okay.
Story, okay.
Yes.
All right, I have one more. thing to
Yes, ma'am.
add. According to the internet, the patroness of the U.S. is Mary under the title of Immaculate
Conception.
Oh, nobody ever heard that.
declared in 1846 by the Roman Catholic bishops of the U.S. I'm just reporting. And I bet George knew it.
So they see Mary as their patron saint, you're saying?
Patroness.
Patroness.
Patron of the Church of the United States, I believe might be a little more accurate.
The Church of the United States. That's different to patron saint of a country. That is much different. If it's a church, if it's of the church.
I'm just
Whereas
telling you what it says.
It says the church, or does it say it's country?
It's the internet, right?
Exactly. Don't believe everything you read.
Yeah, that is true too. But
Right.
but if it's of the church, that obviously if you're talking about the Roman church will see that as will see Mary because that's who they revere first and foremost. So I can understand that. Pam, sorry to interrupt you. Can you ask Duncan to tell me what's going on?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you, because I see 6:30 is gone. The next person is James of Jerusalem, who is considered the brother of our Lord. He's mentioned, and we do not know for sure. I think I said this last week or week before last. I think it was last week I said this when we were talking about the Marys. We do not know for sure if brother here means biological brother, step brother, brother in Christ, cousin, what have you. The Protestants believe that these were Jesus's biological brothers, that Mary and Joseph had children. And when it talks about Jesus's brothers and sisters and his mother coming to see him, that these were actual brothers of his that were biological. The Roman church believed that Mary never had any other children, and these could possibly have been children of Joseph, although in the Bible there's no mention of that either. So we are in limbo as to whether or not these are Jesus's real brothers or sisters or whoever. But James of Jerusalem is always mentioned in the Bible as the brother of our Lord. And he's another one whose name comes first, which means that whoever children they belong to, he was the eldest. And because he is mentioned first, and he was very much revered as a leader of Jerusalem. So he's called St. James of Jerusalem because he was the one in charge of the church in Jerusalem. Yes, Pam.
So he's waiting for the host.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, my dear. Thank you.
I'll let you know when it starts.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So he is he's the most prominent. The Bible also speaks of a brother named Jude. Judas, I think it is not Jude, Judas, who is believed to have written the book of Jude in the letter of Jude in the New Testament. James of Jerusalem is supposed to have written the letter of James in the Bible. Although as well, there is still some bone of contention in that, because the tone of the letter is that of James. However, the writing of it, the language, the Greek language that is involved in it does not seem as if it would have been of James. But the tone of the letter seemed to be James's tone, because as we'll get to it, we talk about conservatives and liberals now. In the days of the church, there were conservatives and liberals too. And James was a very conservative guy in those days. Yes, Bryce.
About Jude, was that written for Judas Asterius? Was that the story about Judas Asterius, or was that written by Judas about Jude Thyasus instead?
No, this book, Jude that we're talking about, was written believably by a brother, quotation marks, of Jesus, named Judas. Correct.
Yeah. Oh, so that was about Judas the betrayer then?
No, it was not. It was not.
Oh, it was not.
It was not.
I thought it was.
No, it was not.
Because I know Jude is the patron saint of lost causes, because I go to St. Jude's in Montour.
Yeah.
Because I know Jude is the patron saint of lost causes.
Yes, he is.
So that Judas Thyasus, you mean, right?
But this is not Judas Iscariot. No. So
it's not Judas Thyasus. So it's Judas. So it's Judas Thyasus.
Judas who?
So it's now. So what you're saying is that it's Jude Thyasus instead, not Judas.
I'm not catching the word that you're saying. Judas who?
No, I said Jude. No, I said Jude Thyasus instead, not Judas Asterius.
I don't know the name. I can't pick up on the name either.
Oh, I think I know what he's talking about. My belief is that the author of the letter of Jude may have been possibly the one who is referred to as the brother of our Lord as well. There are two brothers of Jesus that are mentioned, and I put that brothers in inverted commas. There's James, and there's the other one called Judas. I will have to double check on that, but I think that's the one we're dealing with.
Yeah, I think it was Judas Thyasus. I don't think it was Judas Asterius.
All right.
So,
that was the betrayer.
Father Tony, Duncan wants to know whether you could text Deborah to remind her, or just put the number in the chat and he'll text her.
Oh gosh.
He doesn't have her cell phone number.
And she has, and nobody, and the host hasn't come in yet? Give me a second, please. Let me see.
All right.
I have been trying to call her today and could not get hold of her. So I don't even know if texting her is going to work. Let me see if I can call her. Let me just see if I can call her again quickly.
Okay.
It's going straight to voicemail.
Yeah.
It's going straight to voicemail. So no one is coming yet. Let me send.
Yeah, you're right. You know, someone, Father, you are right. Jude is a servant of Jesus and a brother of James. To those who are called by the love by God the Father and kept Jesus Christ, may mercy and peace and love be multiple to you. So you are absolutely right, Father.
All right, thanks. Thank you, buddy. Let me just say, I'm going to send you, Pam. Let me see if I could. Where are you? Let me send you her number, and then you can pass that on to him. But I don't see her answering, because she has not been answering her phone all evening, and I don't know why.
Okay.
I mean, if they don't have a meeting, that'd be good for me. I'll get through with what I need to do.
Right.
Let me just put it in here for you. And I hope he has the correct link.
I hope so too.
I just sent it to you. I hope he has in chat. I hope he has the correct link. But she's not answering.
Okay, I'll have him text her.
Yeah, let me see if I have, do I have Michelle's number? Let me see. Hold 1 second. Let me see if I get hold of. What is wrong with people in the keys? There's nobody answering the phone. It comes straight to voicemail.
Maybe they're all in a meeting.
Let me do one other
So
thing
we
here.
only have
Just,
2 more Bible studies left, huh?
just give me 1 second.
Next Wednesday and then the following Wednesday, correct?
No, it will be this, next Wednesday is the last one.
Oh, so next Wednesday is the last one
Mhm.
until the fall, right?
Yes.
To the fall, correct.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure about that. I just didn't know. So there's no Bible study the 19th or the 26th.
Not getting on either. Yeah, because I mean, I'm doing Bible study class, but Duncan was trying to get on as well. So let me know if you're on and I'm off, but you can't get on as well. And I've tried calling Deborah, and her phone is going straight to voicemail. I tried calling Michelle, her phone is going straight to voicemail. So I don't know what's going on down in the keys. Yeah, because I haven't heard anything. All right, I just wanted to touch base with you to make sure that if you were on or not. Yeah. I think we can. I think we can. I think we can. All right. I have it down to do. I know it's the day before I travel. Are you still traveling on the 20th or on the 20th or the 21st? On the 21st or the 22nd? Okay, I'm leaving on the 21st, but Caracas is down to the 20th. So I think we will still have it because we didn't have it last month either. And then we're not going to have it in July and August. Yeah, okay? Okay. Nice talking to you, Sanford. I have to run because I'm on Bible study with my members. So let me get back to my class. But thank you for taking my call, okay? All right, thanks. Say hello to Tony, okay? God bless. All right. Thanks, Sanford. Bye. I'm sorry about that, folks. Tell Duncan that Father Sanford isn't getting on either.
Okay, all right.
All right. So I don't know what's going on. Sorry, folks. I think we could continue with class, so that's fine. Where was I? James of Jerusalem. Now, the other thing about James is we know that he was one of the brothers who were outside when they were worried, they were concerned for his safety and even worried about his sanity in Mark chapter 3, when one of the disciples came back in and told Jesus that your brothers and mother and sisters are outside looking for you and they're asking for you. And he said to them, whoever does the will of God is my brother and my sister and my mother. And it's not that he's saying that biological siblings and mothers and fathers are not important, but he also wants others to realize that your church family, your Christian family, those who do the will of God, those are the ones that you need to spend time with and are important in our lives as well.
Father, can I ask a real quick question?
Yes.
What do the Orthodox feel about the siblings of Jesus? Do they still?
I don't know. I am not sure how they feel. I don't remember what their let me see something. Oh, when is Pam back? Pam, can you do us a favor? And Deacon asked a very interesting question, and I think I know I would have known at some point in time, but I do not remember right now. What is the Orthodox Church's position on Jesus and siblings and his siblings?
I'll look.
Yes,
It'll
please.
take me a minute.
That's why I'm asking you to do it.
Right.
To see if they have a similar, are they similar to the Roman Church, or are they similar to the Protestant Church?
Right.
Or are they somewhere in between with another?
Probably that.
Siblings.
Okay. And then we also realize, if we were to look at John chapter 7, let's turn to John chapter 7, because we haven't looked at, we haven't gone into John as yet. Let's look at John chapter 7. And in John chapter 7, you will find that Jesus's brother tried to manipulate him, urging him to speak more openly than he was doing, and he rejected their plea. Their suggestion. John chapter 7, verse, let's see here. Let me start at verse 1. Since I don't seem to be going to be having class, George, would you like to start us off in reading, sir? John chapter 7, beginning at verse 1. And I'll tell you when to stop. Okay.
After this, Jesus moved about within Galilee, but he did not wish to travel in Judea because the Jews were trying to kill him. But the Jewish feast of tabernacles was near. So his brothers said to him, "Leave here and go to Judea, so that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. No one works in secret if he wants to be known publicly. If you do these things, manifest yourself to the world." For his brothers did not believe in him. So Jesus said to them, "My time is not yet here, but the time is always right for you. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me, because I testify to it and that its works are evil. You go up to the feast. I am not going up to this feast, because my time has not yet been fulfilled." After he had said this, he stayed on in Galilee.
Thank you, George. So you see here, the whole notion of Jesus's brothers are mentioned again, and they're having a difficult time believing him and believing in him, so much so that they want him to go out and to publicize who he is to the world. And maybe that will make them believe him. One thing about Jesus is that Jesus was never one to publicly show off to the world. If you remember, he used to tell people when he did things, "Do not let it not be known. Please do not tell anyone," because it was always to be more of the Father, about the God, the Father, than about him. And even I think it was the beggar or the blind man who he had healed, and he said, "Say nothing to no one." And the man went off and ran around and tell everybody what he did. So I mentioned that here about the brother of James, because where they were trying to manipulate him to do the things that he did, but he said to them, his time has not come. It is not the time for him to do that as yet. So I just wanted to mention that there.
But if you keep reading, he went.
Say that again?
But if you keep reading, he did go to the feast.
Yeah, he did eventually, but that's not the point I'm trying to make there. The point I'm trying to make is how they were trying to manipulate him to do what they wanted him to do. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Why would they try to manipulate him anyway?
Hold on a minute. And before you answer that, before I answer you, Bryce, and if you realize too, Marilyn, he did go, but again, he didn't go the way he didn't go the way they wanted him to go. They wanted him to go publicly. They wanted him to do things, but he went secretly. So he did go, but not the way they wanted. And he didn't want to go with them either. So he let them go on first, and then he went afterwards. What's that, Bryce?
Why would they try and manipulate him anyway? Why were they trying to manipulate him?
No, they were just they were just saying to him, if you're doing all these good things, why don't you let people know what you're doing? It should be seen, it should be heard, it should be people should see what's going on instead of just doing it behind closed doors, just doing it in secret. But Jesus was not, as far as he was concerned. You have to remember, Jesus did what the Father wanted him to do. He did not do things when people wanted him to do them, or when even he sometimes may have wanted to do them. He did them and the Father wanted him to do that, because really and truly he was sent here to glorify the Father, not to glorify himself.
Is that before he was crucified by the Romans and the Greeks?
This was before he was crucified. Correct.
Oof. So this is before he was crucified by the Romans and the Greeks, you're saying?
Yeah.
Oof.
All right, let us continue.
So, Father,
Mhm.
the answer to your question is that Catholic Church believes they were cousins, and the Eastern Orthodox Church believes they were children of Joseph from a previous marriage.
That's what the Eastern Orthodox Church believes,
Right.
that they were Joseph's children, which is, as I said, some folks believe that as well. Yes.
Right.
Where'd that
So you're
come from?
saying Joseph was married before he was married to Mary?
Because really and truly, and I should have thought about that, because that's the logical one. As I said, that's the one in the middle, because we have the Roman Church who don't believe that Mary had any other children, so they were really not his brothers. And as you said, they believe that they're cousins, that's just understandable. They don't even see them as probably as Joseph's children, whereas the other alternative is what the Protestant position is that they were both Joseph and Mary's children, so they were Jesus's biological brothers, and the Orthodox came in between and said, no, they're his stepbrothers and sisters. That's what they said, and that's
Another
So wait a minute.
mystery.
Are you saying that Joseph was married before he was married to Mary? They were half brothers and everything?
That is one possible.
That is one possible belief. Correct.
What? That Joseph was married before he married Mary?
Correct.
Yes.
He was
Wow.
he was an older
The
man.
Catholic Church is
older.
saying they never had sex.
Hold on a minute. What is that, please?
I said, it seems like the Catholic Church, if they believe she didn't have other children, and that their relationship must have been asexual, or what was going on?
George will be able to better answer that, but I believe you're correct in saying that. At least if even they did, it was not known because they had no children to prove it. So that is why she's referred to as the ever blessed virgin. But George can, if George has anything to add to that, he could. But that's the Roman Church's belief. And as I said, yeah, I should, as soon as you said it, Pam, it came right back to me. That's the Orthodox Church's belief, that Joseph was, and they have the premise that Joseph was married before, he had children before Mary, but he had none with Mary, and that's their position. That's their Orthodox.
I don't believe that. I believe he was married with Mary, even if he was married before. I believe he was married to Mary, and they did have children.
Right. Well, if you believe that, that's the Protestant view. The Protestant view is.
Well, I'm not Protestant. I'm Episcopalian, so I wouldn't. I'm just the same thing as Catholic. I'm not Protestant, so I wouldn't know.
Well, let me say this. And one of these times I will have probably have a class on this, or a couple of classes on this. But you see, the Episcopal Church is seen as both Protestant and Catholic.
What?
Yes.
I thought it was just
No.
just seen as Catholic. I would have never known it was seen as
It
both.
is seen as Protestant and Catholic. But we don't want
Really?
to, yes, we don't want to get into that now because that's not the bone of contention right now.
The Episcopal
But-
Church
but-
used
but-
to be called the
But to
Protestant.
me, it used
Episcopal
to be,
Church.
but it used, but the title of the Episcopal Church used to be, well, this is a shortened form of it, which was the Protestant Episcopal Church, but it had something to do with the domestic something. It was a big long word that had the Protestant word in it, the Episcopal Church, and that is
All
why,
right.
and that is
All
why
right, so
you
now I
see-
know something. Now I know something.
Yes. Mind you, though, in the Anglican Communion, the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Church are not seen as Protestant. They are seen as Anglo-Catholic.
Right, because
That is in the rest of the Anglican Communion.
right, because
but-
my church in Wantor is actually an Anglican Episcopal Church. So is Grace Episcopal Church in Massapequa.
But here in the United States, it is seen. The Roman Church sees the Episcopal Church technically like the Protestant Church, or I should say the Roman Church does. In fact, it may not be right to say the Roman Church does, but people in America see the only Catholic Church as the Roman Church in the country. That's how they see it. So that's why they use the word Catholic. And when they really use the word Catholic, they're referring to the Roman Catholic Church. And they see all the others as Protestant. Yes, Susan.
Well, in Ireland, when they have the Catholic Protestant wars, aren't they fighting against the Episcopalians? I mean, weren't they?
When they had the Irish Catholic Wars.
Well,
The troubles.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't really remember.
the troubles between the.
Oh, the Troubles. Yes.
Protestant.
Well, yes, there was bone of contention between the two. I mean, if you look at Ireland, it is interesting with Ireland because the same two types of bishops in Ireland, the same as in for the Roman Church as for the Episcopal Church. There's a primate of all Ireland and a primate of Ireland in the Roman Church, and the same thing in the Anglican Church later. So, but yes, they've had their struggles.
But it
and
was
they're-
against the Episcopalians, right? Not
Yes.
just Lutherans and,
Correct.
okay.
Correct. Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. All right. That's a different class. Let's move on. George, I hope you don't feel away when we're talking about this in the Roman Church.
Not at all.
Oh, okay. Because sometimes I feel it like my heart is going out to you. So I just
Yeah,
want
don't you have to leave us, Father? You have to go to a class. pretty soon.
I don't think they have in the class the meeting. I'm not hearing anything. So we'll move on. We'll move on. Let's see. I'm trying to see now, when we get into the whole notion, as I said earlier, about the conservatives and the liberals, and they had it back out in James of Jerusalem Day. This came about as a result of the way how the Christian church was forming. Now, remember that Christianity came out of Judaism and out of Gentiles. Jews became Christians, Gentiles became Christians. And so there was a Christian church in Jerusalem of which James was in charge. And he received news that the Gentiles were becoming Christians, and that's a good thing. But they did not like how they were becoming Christians. And what happened is that James of Jerusalem, he was on the conservative end of the spectrum. And believe it or not, St. Paul was on the liberal end of the spectrum. And what was happening is that the leaders in Jerusalem, like James, felt that the Gentiles were becoming Christians too easily. There was what happened about circumcision? What happened about the foods they ate? These, remember, the Jews were the ones who had the 613 rules besides the 10 commandments. And they felt that, when people came into Christianity from Judaism, they brought their heritage with them. They still sought to live some of these things, not to mention that once you're circumcised after 8 days old, you can't become uncircumcised. So you took that with you into it. Whereas the Gentiles came with nothing. They were pagans. They were heathens. They may have had their own gods, some of them, but they were classified as pagans, as heathens. And therefore, when they came, they were not circumcised. When they came, they didn't have any dietary laws, and so forth. And so the more conservative Christians in Jerusalem did not like what was happening. So they had a come to Jesus meeting, literally. They had a council or a conference where they met and they shared, and you can, I think if you read, we did this in the Acts of the Apostles, it's in Acts chapter 15. You can go back and you can read it again. And George is shaking his head. Yes, we did this already, where the two then had this come to Jesus meeting, and Paul was very much a stickler for we are not turning Gentiles into Jews and to turn them back into Christians, because that's what it would have been tantamount. If you want them to be circumcised, you want them to have these dietary laws and all that, you're making them into Jews, back into Christians, and then back to Christians, and that should not be the case. And so
That sounds interesting.
Circumcision was the real issue, or do you think it's the lack of acceptance of the Gentiles that was the issue? They used circumcision.
That is a good question. You see, you see, I don't think anyone can really seriously answer that, because they give you the surface question, the surface answer, which was circumcision, but no one knows. But you don't know what was going on behind closed doors, if it was that they did not want to accept Gentiles. And chances are, knowing how the Jews were, they did not want to accept Gentiles. So it could be a combination of both. I would not be surprised if it was. And they were using the circumcision and certain laws as means of which they were, at least if these were happening, we could feel that they were like little mini Jews, that kind of thing. So I think you're onto something there, Deacon, that it may have been part of both. It may have been, it may have been part of both, but we don't know for sure, because we are not told that the real reason is that they wanted to have, they didn't really want to have them in the Christian faith because they were not Jewish. We are not told that, but it could be part of the problem. Yes, Bryce.
I have to go, so it was
All
really
right,
nice
Bryce.
chatting with you guys. So
All
I will
right.
see you next Wednesday for the last
See you next
class.
Sunday. All right. Good, Bryce. Have
Next
a good
Wednesday.
evening. Next Wednesday.
Good night.
All right.
Good night.
Good night. Have a good night.
You too.
All right. So yes, there may be truth in but let me say there may be. I think there is very much truth in what you're saying, Deacon, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, what did come out of it is that James became a moderate, and they decided that they will not allow Gentiles to be circumcised or to have to practice all these laws, but to be able to convert to Christianity, so they don't have to convert to Judaism then to convert to Christianity. What they will do is what they settled on, or the compromise is that they would avoid practicing pagan sexual rituals and offering meat in sacrifice to idols. Those were the two things that they decided on that that the Gentile Christians could not do, and they were happy with that, and that was it. James as well, this particular James, this James is also said he was martyred. He was stoned, we believe, sometime before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, and the temple of Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70, and it's believed that James was killed around 62, 63 AD. And also, as I said earlier, that it is believed that he is the author of the letter of James. He calls himself a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. And he was writing to the 12 tribes in the dispersion. But the thing about it is There are scholars today who doubt that he wrote the letter because of the amount of Greek that stands out in that book, in that letter, which would have been inconsistent with someone of a Jewish nature. But at the same time, the tone of the letter is a tone of his reputation, because it is a letter that strongly upholds Jewish customs and so forth.
You know, I
So,
never read that
letter?
book before
Yeah,
this assigned reading,
yeah, you should read it.
and it was a beautiful book.
It is a beautiful book.
Beautiful.
It is.
Oh,
It
it's
is.
wonderful.
It is a beautiful book.
Beautiful.
It is a beautiful book.
It's an outstanding
Yes, it is. It
book.
is. Okay, and the last James is James, the son of Mary and Clopas. Again, there's not much mention about him. He's one of the two sons of Mary. There's James, and there's some gospels say Joseph, some say Joseph. And Mark's gospel referred to him, chapter 15 refers to him as James the Younger. And I will tell you this, we talked about three major James: James, the son of Zebedee, James of Jerusalem, and now this one, James, the son of Mary and Clopas. And the church has given them all nicknames to distinguish each one of them. James, the son of Zebedee, is called James the Great. So if you've ever heard the term James the Great, they're referring to James, the son of Zebedee. If you have ever heard the name James the Just, they're talking about James of Jerusalem. And if you've ever heard the term James the Less, they're talking about James, the son of Mary and Clopas. So you got James the Great, James the Just, James the Less. And so the church has given them these names, so much so that there are churches that are called James the Great and James the Less and so forth, that are named. Any questions on James?
Nope.
You covered it well.
All right, let's go to Joseph. And the Josephs in the book, and the main ones are very much, the stories of them. So I'm just going to touch briefly a bit on them. But believe it or not, there are about 14 or 15 Josephs in the Bible.
You don't have to.
But we are only going to touch on 4, I think.
Okay.
Let me make sure. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to touch on 4. The first Joseph we're going to touch on is none other than Joseph, who was the son of Jacob, the governor of Egypt. And he is in the Old Testament. And we know that the story of him. He was the son of Jacob and also Rachel. In fact, his mother was barren for many years before she had him. And then she had his brother after him, Benjamin. He was the father's favorite. Father didn't learn his lesson from before when his parents had favorite. His parents, Esau was Isaac's favorite, and Rebecca was Jacob, and Jacob was Rebecca's favorite. And we know how that all turned out. And now he comes and he does the same thing with Joseph. And we realize how that also turns out with having favorites, and always lead to the jealousy of his brothers. They did not like him. And he also, not only did his father make it bad for him, but he made it also worse for himself by thinking that, telling his brother, by becoming a dreamer and telling his brothers about these sheaves of grain that were bowing down to him. And each of them were his brothers bowing to him, the same way he talked about the 11 stars and the sun and the moon, and the sun and the moon in that case represented his mother and father, and the 11 stars were the brothers all bowing down to him, and that did not bring him any favors with his brothers. And you can read all of that in Genesis chapter 37. And so he told his dreams to his family, and his brothers were outraged. And even the whole Joseph only start taking note when he realized that the father was going to be bowing down to him too. So even Joseph was a bit disturbed, by what he was saying. And the brothers sought their revenge when the father set him out in the beautiful coat that he had given to him. And they decided, when he went out to meet his brothers, he was wearing this coat, and they decided they were going to kill him. And his oldest brother, Reuben, is who saved his life and told him instead, no, let's put him in a pit and leave him there for dead instead of killing him. And so, but Reuben
That's much nicer.
Yeah. That's much nicer. Well, you see, Reuben intended though to come back.
I think he
and
was
get
coming
him.
back, right?
He was coming back to get him out of the pit. But he didn't succeed in that, because he went off and most of the guys stayed around, and at the same time some traders came up. They said, let us sell him to the people going to Egypt, and off he went. So by the time Reuben came back and that's where he was gone. So but at least he was alive. So what they do is that they take his coat and they dip it in blood and take it back to the father. And poor Jacob, when he realized that, when he thought now that Joseph is dead, how grieved he was as a result. Then we know about Joseph in Egypt. He was sold to this man whose name was Potiphar, who's the captain of Pharaoh's guard. And Pharaoh Potiphar liked him, saw his skill, his trustworthiness. He made him a steward over his estate. So Potiphar loved him, but also somebody else loved him even more, and that was Potiphar's wife. And so
But back to the women.
You can't escape that one now. I mean, I'm sorry, we can't escape that one. So the story. His wife saw his handsome face, and that is in chapter 39. She saw his handsome face. She tried to seduce him on several occasions. He wouldn't take the bait, and one of the times he ran off, and she grabbed his garment, and away he went. And he was in trouble, because then obviously she accused him of attempted rape and used the garment as evidence. And so he enraged Potiphar, of course, because he thinks his wife is telling the truth, and off to prison Joseph went. Now, while he was in prison, he met two people there when that was there, the Pharaoh's personal cupbearer and the Pharaoh's baker. And they two were in prison, and then they two had dreams, peculiar dreams. You read about those in chapter 40, I think, of Genesis. And they complained to Joseph about it, and he again was able to interpret their dreams. And we know that the cupbearer, he told him after 3 days he will go back being the king's cupbearer. Whereas the baker, because the birds were eating off the bread off his head in a basket, he was going to be hung. And so said, it happened in 3 days. But one thing that Joseph told the cupbearer is, please remember me that I'm in here when you get back out. But as human beings, forgot all about Joseph, and Joseph continued to languish in prison. Until the Pharaoh had a dream, or at least he had two dreams. And he had two dreams where one saw some fat cows and then all of a sudden some thin sickly cows came up and ate the fat cows. And he also had the same thing with the grain, with wheat, where he had 7 ears of nice, luscious looking wheat. And then there were 7 unhealthy looking ones that came up, thin ones that came up, blighted ones that came up, and they ate the healthy wheat. And so Joseph was able to tell the king, the 7 years mean that you will have 7 years of great plenty, and there will be 7 years of famine. And so it happened. And before it happened, however, Joseph was able to tell the Pharaoh what to do in order to be able not to have this as a crisis for you. And the Pharaoh thought it was a really good deal and said, well, who better person than to run it than Joseph? And so Joseph became the number 2 man in Egypt. In the meantime as well, Joseph got married to an Egyptian woman, Asenath, and she was the daughter of a priest whose name was almost like Potiphar, but Potipharah, and he had 2 sons, Manasseh, who was the elder, and Ephraim, and he was able to, when the famine came, his planning was able to keep bread on the tables of the Egyptians. And as you know, then Canaan, where his father and his siblings were, they were running out of stuff, and they needed to come over to Egypt to buy food. And that is when Joseph meets his brothers for the first time in a long time. And as soon as they came, he knew who they were. And although he decided to play a little few games with them, hey, you know what you did to me? I can't let you get off so easily. He made sure that he kept one of them. When he kept one brother, the rest had to go home. And he put the money back in their sacks, and they found the money, and they wanted to know, they felt now that they're going to be gotten accused of stealing the money. And he told them they got to bring back Benjamin, and poor Jacob now got to send Benjamin back. He lost Joseph, and he might lose Benjamin too, and poor Rachel's children would have gone. But he still sends him, and as we know, eventually Joseph reveals himself to them, and he forgives them, and he tells them that, you all did this for ill, but God did this for good. And it takes you back to that saying that I hear my mother always say, out of every bad situation, good comes out of it. And this is a perfect example of that taking place. And then obviously he brings his family over, his father over, and all the others came over to Egypt. And that is how the Israelites ended up in Egypt before we get to the Exodus, where then they exit Egypt after so many years, many years. When Joseph dies, he told them when he was about to die, he told them he wanted to return to Canaan Joseph returned to Canaan once so as to bury his father, Jacob, after he died. But when Joseph died, Joseph also wanted to be buried in Canaan, and so the request will be honored years later when they were leaving Egypt in the Exodus. Moses made sure that his remains were taken back to Canaan, where he wanted to be buried. Any questions on Joseph? Easy guy, everybody know that story. If you don't know the Joseph story, you don't know Joseph. That's Joseph's story. And you can know this other one too. Joseph, the husband of Mary and earthly father of Jesus. I mean, the other Josephs, I will send you where they're recorded in the book, in the Bible, but they're just like a verse. They're like the great grandfather of someone, or a descendant of someone, or the son of someone, or the father of someone. They're not anything of worth about them. Joseph, the mother of the husband of Mary and the earthly father of Jesus, and we know that his role is very much in Matthew and Luke's gospel, the birth narratives of Jesus. He is not named in Mark's gospel, and only John mentions him only in reference to Jesus as the son of Joseph in John chapter 1 and verse 45 and chapter 6 verse 42. So really and truly, Joseph, the husband of Mary, is contained in both Matthew's gospel and Luke's gospel, and not in Mark or John's gospels. He is a man, he's seen as a descendant of David, which means he was of the house of David, and through him, although he was not Jesus's biological father, through him, Jesus was also counted as David's descendant. And according to the book, the Gospel of Matthew, Joseph was a man of integrity. He was a man of honor. He was a man of loyalty. And we know in both Gospels, in both Matthew and Luke, he and Mary were betrothed. They were not yet married when she became pregnant. And when he learned that she was carrying another child, he obviously did not understand it. He was planning on divorcing her quietly. But we are told in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 1, and verse 18 and 19, that he was a just man, and that therefore he decided not to divorce. He was a just man, and he decided that he was going to divorce her quietly and to save her from public disgrace of having a full court action in those days against her. However, before he even did that, Joseph would have a series of dreams. The first one, obviously, was an angel came to him and told him, listen, the child that Mary is bearing is from the Holy Spirit. She did not go with any other guy. Don't worry about it. And you must call his name Jesus. We want you to take care of him, bring him up, and that he's going to save the people from their sins. And so Joseph went through with the marriage. That's what he did. Then about a couple years later, he has a second dream. And the second dream was that after Jesus was born and the wise men traveled from the east and so forth. Now, let me make this quite clear. Do not think that the wise men came to Jesus by concord. They didn't. They came on camels. And they came from the east.
Well, it took a while.
So just to make you understand, anybody ever rode a camel yet? I've ridden a camel. They go along very slowly. Jesus, so the wise men, I mean, we celebrate Christmas on December 25th and Epiphany, which is the wise men on January 6th. They did not get to Jesus in 2 weeks. Let me tell you, it was more like 2 years. And so I just want you to know that. So a couple of years later, Joseph will have another dream, and that dream was that Herod was wanted to kill the child, and that they were not to go home, they were to go to Egypt. And so off to Egypt they went. Mind you, before they went off to Egypt, before they left, I want you to remember that they had already circumcised Jesus 8 days afterwards. They had already named him, and Joseph was involved with that. They had already gone to the temple for the purification and the presentation of him. Joseph was also at that as well. And so he takes the mother and his son over to Egypt, and they stayed there. We are not sure how long, several months, maybe even years. And then he received a third dream. And that third dream said it was safe to return. And that another dream from that an angel in a dream told him that it was safe to return. Then he had a fourth dream, and that fourth dream was that he was warned not to go back to Bethlehem, where Herod's son now Archelaus was now in charge. That still posed a danger. So instead of going back to Bethlehem, he went further north into a place called Nazareth, which is in the region of Galilee. And so that is where they live. And so you see Joseph protected his family and to get away from getting his son murdered. And as you know, the church celebrates the Feast of the Holy Innocents, which are the kids, the 2-year-olds and under, who were killed by Herod. Joseph was present again when Jesus was 12 years old, and they went to the Passover feast, and they took Jesus with them, and they left, and then when they were a whole day going home, they realized, no Jesus. Time for bed, there's no Jesus to tuck him in. And when they looked around, they asked all the friends where this guy is. Nobody could find him. They had to go right back to Jerusalem again. And there was Jesus in the temple, speaking with the learned men and asking questions and answering questions and answering questions as well. And telling his parents, when his mother asked him, well, why have you done this to us? You don't think we would have been worried? He says, and didn't you not know that I will be about my Father's business? And, a little young upstart. But then he goes home with them, and poor Mary ponders all these things in her heart. Yes, Pam.
So that story to me is the most obvious argument that she had more children, because what mother misses her only child on a trip?
Not necessarily.
Come on, people.
Not necessarily.
Come on, people.
Not necessarily.
No, I'm just telling you, it's the argument that
they will use. Yes. But you see, the thing is, but you have to remember as well, in those days, and even when I was growing up as a kid, you could easily have been with auntie somebody or uncle someone or your cousins, or they think, because they always told you they take a village to raise a child.
For 2 days.
I don't. Well, that's what they say.
I get it. If
what?
you told me it was 2 hours, I'd say, yeah, you're right. You're right. But 2 days?
You can never.
Must have been good conversation with the next people.
But let me ask a question then. I could also say to you then that you should never have if let's just say, we don't even know. Okay, let's say she had other children. If he's the youngest of the lot, you will still not have, I mean, would you still not have missed him? So
No,
why
he
would
would
it
have
stay?
been the oldest of the lot, right?
Not if they were.
Well, yeah, he would be the oldest of the lot. He would have been the oldest.
Had more
If Mary had more children, he would have been the oldest of the lot. Correct.
Right.
He would have been the oldest of the lot. So I mean, even if he was the oldest of the lot, you don't think that even at the end of one day, she might be thinking, well, where's my oldest son? Let me.
Oh, yeah, well.
You get what I'm saying? But I personally think, as you know, me and numbers in the Bible don't always mesh. So I am always a stickler for numbers in the Bible. But the thing about it is that whether it was 1 day or 2 days, I just personally feel that he was mixed up in the crowd. They're a village. They all know one another, and they did not think that anything was amiss. That's my feeling.
I've got to take off.
All right, Linda. Okay, bye-bye there.
See you next week.
Next week. Good to see you,
Okay,
Linda.
thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that's my whole thing. But you may be right, Pam, but That's my feeling of it. That's my
Yeah.
feeling of it.
Who knows? I'm just.
Who knows? But no,
spouting off.
no, that's fine. I got no problems with that. Don't think I have a problem with that. I don't at all. I really don't. And we'll soon wrap up. The other thing is that Joseph trained Jesus into the family business of carpentry. So we know that he was he was called the carpenter's son. And there's also again mention in Matthew chapter 13 and verse 55 about there being 4 sons are mentioned and several daughters are mentioned in Matthew 13:55. When they ask, isn't this the carpenter's son, Mary's son, and isn't his brothers James and John and Joseph and Simon and Jude and all, and his sisters with us? All of that. Now, that is my argument that there might have been others. If there was to be any argument, Matthew chapter 13 and 55 is my argument. Because for me, when you read Matthew, let's turn to Matthew 13 and 55. Let's do that. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 13 and verse 55. That would be my argument, Pam, if there is,
Exactly.
that would be my,
absolutely.
that is my biggest argument.
One.
That's my biggest argument for it.
Right.
If you start at verse 53, when Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers? They asked. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things? And they took offense at him. That for me is the major point in the Bible that makes me feel, because here's it. These are the people who know them. They know the family.
Right.
It goes back again to knowing the family, and they know the family. There's even, bless you, there's even one called Joseph Jr. You know, so for me, that would be it. If they are really his biological brothers, those are the verses that really would tell me that he is. But again,
You know what happened to him in the end?
who?
Joseph? The father?
No one knows. The Bible doesn't tell you.
I don't think I remember that.
It is not written in the Bible. And if you realize, once Jesus becomes a man, it is probably believed that he was dead by then, because
they mentioned his mother, but they never mentioned him.
They don't mention his brother, because Joseph is seen to be an older person. He was seen as an older man. Mary is a young girl. He was an older man. And so by the time you see Jesus starts his ministry, you don't hear about you don't hear about Joseph at all. And it's presumed that he might have been dead by then. You only hear about Mary when as I said, sometime when they had the wedding.
Right.
Joseph was not there, Mary was there.
Right.
When at the crucifixion of Jesus, Mary was there, Joseph was not there. When he entered the upper room after the resurrection, Mary was there, Joseph was not there. So Joseph is not on the scene after that, once he becomes an adult. Yes, so for me, but you know, we are not sure if the Protestant is right, the Roman is right, or the Orthodox are right. So we got 3 different theories as to which one is right. All right, Joseph of Arimathea. Yeah, everybody knows Joseph of Arimathea. He was a wealthy man, a respected man, a Pharisee, a member of the Sanhedrin. He was from the town of Arimathea, which was in southern Samaria. Obviously, he was not one to put Jesus to death. He is known in Mark's Gospel and Luke's Gospel, Mark's Gospel chapter 15, Luke's Gospel 23, as looking for the kingdom of God. He's identified by both Matthew and John's Gospel as a disciple of Jesus, but he had a secret relationship, according to John, because of fear of the Jews and most likely fear of the Pharisees themselves. The Pharisees will not have wanted one of their own following Jesus. Same thing with Nicodemus. He and Nicodemus were alike. Two of them were two peas in a pod, looking for the kingdom of God, but too afraid because they still want to keep their position of honor within the Jewish society. And once Jesus dies, he was there when Jesus died, and he was able to go and, well, I'm not sure if he was there when Jesus died, but after Jesus's crucifixion, for sure he was there. He went and asked for the body of, since he was a man of high standing, high social standing, he could go to Pilate and tell to Pilate, oh, I want Jesus's body, and Pilate handed it over to him. And so Jesus was removed from the cross and given to him. Now, I mean, it always sounds as if, he touched the body of Jesus. Possibly not. He probably didn't, because of the standing that he had. It's possible that his servants are who prepared the body for burial and who took him to the tomb, a new family tomb, because touching a corpse in those days, according to Jewish law, he would have been deemed ritually unclean, and so it is quite possible his servants did it and not him. But also too, in Jewish law, the corpse had to be buried before sundown on the day of the death. However, the Roman practice was, and remember it was a Roman crucifixion, the Roman practice was that an executed criminal was supposed to have been left on the cross for days and be devoured by vultures. That was the thing. That was the custom in those days. That was the Roman custom. Obviously, the Jewish custom is we want them off the cross. But in the Roman custom, once you were a criminal, and you were executed as a criminal, your body was left on the cross for days until you were eaten. Fortunately, that didn't happen to Jesus. They took him off the cross and put him and buried him in a tomb. John tells us that Nicodemus, who was another member, as I spoke about just now, of the Sanhedrin, obviously, he was Joseph of Arimathea buddy. The two of them were in the same position, probably used to call each other at night and wonder, man, what do you think about this man Jesus, man? He got me here not knowing what to do, stay with the Pharisees or go with him. And one telling the other one, oh, we could still be with him, but nobody got to know. So that's what they went around doing. But both he was there to provide spices to assist with the burial. And obviously Jesus was wrapped in linen cloth, placed in the rock. There were women who were there that saw him, most notably Mary Magdalene, so that she knew where to go back the next time to take more spices. And everything was done. It was a Sabbath. And that was the end of Joseph of Arimathea.
Father, can I commend you?
Yes, Deacon.
The sermon that you did 2 years ago on Good Friday about Joseph of Arimathea was the best sermon and in depth about him that I had ever heard.
Oh, about Joseph of Arimathea. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And then the last Joseph we are going to touch on, there's not much on him either, is Joseph Barsabbas. Joseph Barsabbas is only mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles after the ascension of Jesus, when they had to replace Judas Iscariot. Two men were chosen: Joseph, also called Barsabbas, who was surnamed Justus, and Matthias, which Acts chapter 1 and verse 23 tells us. And so you remember they cast lots, and the lot fell on Matthias and not this Joseph. We know that he was a man who would have traveled with Jesus, because the apostles asked about that when they were choosing these men. So they know that he traveled with Jesus. Remember, Jesus had the inner circle, which was Peter, James, and John. He had the other 9 disciples, but he also had other followers who were being disciples. So because don't think that it was just the 12 disciples and Jesus only. There were others who used to follow. And so Joseph, called Barsabbas, was felt to be one of them as also. And that's it. That's all we know about him. Any questions
Was
on
he
all
on
the
your list? I didn't see it on the list.
Huh?
Was he the one you were just talking about? Was he on the list?
When I listed them,
Yes.
I think he wasn't. I thought so.
Not
Let
sure
me-
if he was, to be honest.
I did.
I
I
don't
not
think
put
so.
him. Oh, I probably did not put him. I forgot him.
It's not. a
Yeah.
big-
Oh no, I
I-
forgot him. I'm
I
sorry.
guess he didn't
know.
have too much mention.
I know. Yeah, he's only mentioned in Acts chapter 1 and verse 23. But I forgot. I would have still put him, but I forgot to put him. I now look back at it and realize, oh shoot, I forgot him.
Well, that was okay.
But he's Joseph Barsabbas, and I mention him specifically too because he had the opportunity to become one of the apostles.
Right.
But he missed it out by
That much.
by that much.
Didn't get the vote.
Next week we are going to look at the Simons in the Bible. Again, there are a lot of them. I think there were about 8 of them, but I'm sure we're not going to touch on all of them.
8 Simon?
I think there are about 8
That
Simons.
was a common name.
Simon, yeah. I think there are about 7 or 8 Simons mentioned in the Bible. I stand on the correction, but I'm almost certain of that. But we will only touch on a few of them. Obviously, notably Simon Peter. So, so we'll do that next week. Good. Hope you. Well, I'm glad I didn't have any meeting. We were able to accomplish it.
There you go.
Yes, and I hope that I hope it was interesting.
It was great. I enjoyed it.
Very
Yeah.
good. Very good. Thank you.
So it's we got the Josephs and the Jameses, and so next week we'll look at the Simons.
I do have
That's
one
fine.
question.
Yeah.
Off the patron saints, what purpose are they? I mean, 'cause we talked about that a little bit. but-
Well, I mean, look at it this way. I think it carries the meaning of you talking about countries. I mean, the patron saints. You could have patron saints of countries. You have patron saints of churches. You got patron saints of different people, occupations. In general, and I mean, George
how do they get it-
George could tell you a whole lot of them where saints are there to help help people who are a certain way or a certain occupation, because those saints themselves may have been in those positions. For example, the patron saint of animals is St. Francis of Assisi, because of Francis being an animal lover. So like he is a patron saint. So to really answer your question, it is just that it gives that country a person, a godly person, that country a godly person to whom they can revere as the patron of their country.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Andrew. Okay, go ahead, George.
Yes, George.
It goes back to the Roman theory of what heaven looks like. And the saints are closer to Jesus than we are.
Correct.
So if you don't want to pay directly to Jesus, you can pay to your patron saint, and then he whispers into Jesus's ear, and then you get what you want.
Correct. Correct.
If it's meant to be.
Okay.
Yes.
Always if it's meant to be.
Always if it's meant to be. Wait. What's Duncan saying? What's Duncan saying?
He's just talking.
I said you all talk too much.
Did they ever come on?
Never.
Okay, good. Well, I was able to finish my class, so we had a good time.
Can we have a patron saint of
Overtime.
winning the lottery? Can you do
The
that?
patron saint of winning the lottery.
Can I find one? Oh,
George will be able to give you that one. I don't know what that one is.
when you find out, pass it.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, George. That helped. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
everyone. I thank you all for being here. And next week we will end off class, and then
Thank-
we will
thanks,
start
Pam.
back in the fall. Okay, Pam.
Okay.
Thank you so much as often. Thanks for looking up that information for me, and also for hosting. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Sleep
week.
well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a wonderful
Have a good night.
week.
Night.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
you all.
Turn the recording
Bye.
off, Pam.